Hi, everyone. Welcome to HFS Unfiltered. I'm thrilled to have you with us for another very exciting edition where we deep dive into trends and transformations shaping the global business services, or what we call GBS. And today we are in for a special treat as we are joined by none other than Sumit Mitra, the CEO of Tesco Business Solutions, a GBS powerhouse that was recently crowned as the best GBS in the world. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Sumit, welcome to the show.
Saurabh, it's a real pleasure to be here today. Thank you very much for the very kind invitation.
Let's kick off by talking about, you've been now crowned as the best GBS in the world. So, as you look back on the 7, 8 years that you've been leading this team, what were the top two or three moments or achievements that you think have helped you, have been pivotal in becoming the best?
Yeah, so look, I joined Tesco almost 7 years ago, and with the whole sole objective was how do we transform Tesco? Because if you remember in 2015, we had one of the biggest write offs in FTSE history, which meant that we had to go through change the way we work, change our culture, change our processes, and change the way how we looked at customers. So there was a whole sort of big change in terms of our transformation journey that we had to go through. At that time, Dave Lewis was the CEO who brought me into the business with the sole purpose: how do we build this global business services model that helps and becomes a catalyst to help with the transformation journey. So if I look back and now sort of almost 7 years on, world's best GBS, if I think about the two or three things, I would say number one, I always believe that culture is the most important piece before you can do anything if you can drive a change. And culture just not only within GBS organization, but also the culture of the parent organization that you're working with to transform. Because you can only go at a pace that organization can consume. So therefore, you need to understand the culture of the organization, the pace of change that organization is going. So our first 2 years was all about building the foundation of a business services, looking at the culture, looking at our process, building the process architecture. What should be the to be process? What should really sit within GBS? What should sit in the markets? How do we add value? And then build those foundation layers of a culture of continuous improvement, building a transformation engine through robotics, artificial intelligence that you can help become more efficient. Then it was all about building a business assurance function that's looking at the risks, the controls that you can drive so that your business is safe. And then have a transition and transformation team that would help transition the work and build that. And then the next 3 years was all about really accelerating, building on that foundation and bringing digital transformation capability to take that forward and build an ecosystem with data science and analytics right at the heart of everything for connecting the dots. And then now, sort of 6 years on, it's all about driving experience and not thinking in a functional lens, but driving experience across multiple functions. Again, with intelligent, data driven science sitting right at the heart and core of everything that you do to unlock that untapped value opportunity. So it's at a pace that organizations can consume, and it's also doing that step by step approach to build. I mean, Rome has never been built in a day. It takes time, but it's getting that seat on the table as well. It's very important because you need to make sure that your voice is heard, and just having a seat is not important. It's also about what do you do with that seat. So that became kind of the foundation of building a world's best GPS.
So Sumit, that's fantastic. As you look at the next 3 years, what are the expectations now of your stakeholders from from a GBS organization? Because you've built the foundation, you are very successful in what you've built. From whatever measure, whether it's experience, whether it's cost, whether it's compliance. Um, what are the expectations now? And as you look at the future, what sort of the operating model that you're looking at?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting. We've done a full pivot in terms of what how we are measured as a business. Um, delivering your KPIs and SLAs, it's gone 3 years ago. That's a given. You're going to deliver that. If you're a good GBS, you will have your processes, you have your technology, and you deliver your process. That's a given. That's your bread and butter. Then the next layer is hopefully by this time we have built this continuous improvement culture and a transformation engine that will keep driving the efficiency. But efficiency is finite. You can't keep churning out same efficiency with the same bunch of people. You can't do that. It's about how do you unlock value. So for us, the next 3 years is about four things. One, how do we drive incremental revenue for the business? Two, how do we drive incremental margin for the business? Three, how do we drive incremental cash for the business? As you know, retail cash is king. And the last one, how do we drive improvement in customer experience? Because hopefully, if you drive customer experience, that would kind of relate back into driving revenue and margin. So, my target incremental revenue, incremental profit, incremental cash, and customer satisfaction. Those are my KPIs. Those are the things that I'm focused on at the moment.
So that's very interesting, Sumit, because and I'm seeing this with more and more, at least the mature GBSs that are out there, is the expectations from a GBS, as you rightly mentioned, is not just cost, compliance, efficiency. That's almost like a hygiene factor. That's a it's I'm not saying that's not important, but it's got to be there. And I think GBSs like yours are being tasked with how do you enable and support growth, market expansion, drive business outcomes, um, for the organization. And so in that light, and then we have new and new technologies like generative AI and other things that are coming into the place. We've got more toys to play with now as well. So do you think it's time to also rebrand GBS? We've been talking about global business services for what, 3 decades now. We here at HFS have been toying with the term generative business services, right? Because it's sort of not just talking about Gen AI, but also talking about how it can generate value, how it can drive growth for the business. What's your sense? Because I think if you ask the common layman who's not a GBS leader or not associated with GBS, the first perception that GBSs have is its cost and compliance and efficiency. Uh, do you think it's time to rebrand ourselves as an industry?
Yeah, I mean, we rebranded it already. Sort of before I joined, it was one center, one operation. It was called Tesco Bangalore. So today, and then when I came in, it was called TBS. Tesco allowed us, gave us the privilege to use the name of Tesco, and we became Tesco Business Services. But services gives you the concept that you're serving. Today, we call ourselves Tesco Business Solutions. What we call us is IGBS. I in small I means intelligent business solutions. The world today is about solving complex problems. So, how do we leverage our capability? Because we are sitting, because data, as you know, is the new oil, right? It's old oil now. It is data. Data is everything. And especially for a retail business, data is everything. So for us, it is a heinous crime when you, as a GBS, is sitting on all this data across finance, procurement, commercial, your people data, your customer data. You need to understand how do you bring that data together to solve very, very complex business problem. And I can give you some of the examples of business problem that we're solving. These are humongous business problems that impacts our business by billions of pounds. So how do you come together as a business to and create that intelligence for the business? And for me, it's two stages. One is about solving the existing problem, and two, predicting what will happen in the future, and really bring the brain of the CEO and CFO so that we can do long term planning a lot better. So that's why I call it intelligent business services, using the intelligence of data and process, and by leveraging technology to solve a business outcome.
Yeah, no, that's great, because even as I think of the value proposition of GBS, I think it's about three P's. Productivity, obviously, I think it's still important, but then it's personalization. Your point around customer experience, it's very, very important. And then the third is prediction, because I don't think there's any other function within the organization who's got the kind of data from different parts of the organization that you have. And so the predictive capabilities, and we are living in a very volatile world, right? We don't know what's going to happen in 3 months. And if you can start to build on the intelligence layers and start to predict, or at least provide that input to the business, I think then it becomes much more than services. Uh, uh, so that's fantastic. So tell me about, let's double down on generative AI for a minute, because you can't have a conversation without talking about it. Are you, as you think of the advancements there, are you excited by it? Are you nervous about it? Are you a bit of both? Uh, what's your sense of the impact of this technology on your organization?
So, look, the way I think about AI is I don't think just AI as generative AI. I think about it as machine learning, building AI, and replicating human neural networks. And the third thing is around building that generative AI where you create new data. So I think, we have been using AI for last 5 years to build tools and to help us take better decisions within the business. So I see the use of AI in two areas. One is about how do you become efficient as an operation, and secondly, how do you use AI to predict the future better and do things now a lot better. So that's how I look at it. So I'll give you some specific examples. Um, One of the things we do from an operational perspective is called product returns, where over the last few years, we have, because of the sheer volume of Tesco, we have almost 295,000 products that we get returned from our customers. And now we had almost 20 to 23 people sitting in Bangalore who would scan those forms, get those forms out from the stores, then kind of classify them, understand what the issues are, return it back to the supplier, have those negotiations. If you remember, in 2018-19 is all about bots. RPA was the big thing, so we put in an RPA to automate some of the, sort of verification, etc., etc. And we were very proud of ourselves and said we've delivered 15-20% efficiency, and we are now running it with 15, 16 people. This is great. We gave ourselves a high five. But today, what we've now looked at, the whole end-to-end hyper automation through AI. AI does the whole thing for us. I have one person who is now talking to the supplier. So what has happened? The person's life has changed, because instead of looking at the data, he or she is now having that conversation and having more commercial conversation, because they have to upskill themselves to have that commercial conversation, while all the mundane activity that was happening through bots and others has been taken over by AI to do that. It's about accuracy of how we are doing things, quicker cash through the door, because we are doing those things a lot faster, and we are negotiating better with better data with suppliers. So that's one. And the second thing I also think from a wider context is we are a 4% margin business, but we want to use our money back into our customers to build those customer proposition that helps us bring in more customers and make us competitive in the market from a pricing perspective. So therefore, AI is a really good way to look at the end-to-end hyper automation to see how do we connect different systems and make it a lot better, smarter. The second thing we are looking at is using AI to build tools like cost intelligence model, which has been a game changer for us. If you cast your mind back 2 years ago, UK was going through a huge inflationary pressure, a lot of inflation. The retail index went up to sort of 16, 17%. So we had a huge cost pressure from all the suppliers to say we're going to increase our cost because they were following the retail index, etc. So what we did was we used AI to look at how do we actually look at individual products. Like for example, bread. What is bread made up of? Bread is made up of yeast, flour, electricity, labor cost, etc., etc., shipment. And then if we scan the whole universe to look at what does it cost now? What does it mean? And what we found that 96% of those ingredients were deflating and 4% was inflating. So therefore we were able to, with data, have those conversations with the supplier to say the actual cost should be this. And we have now rolled this out across with all our products, which gives us good control. This is AI driven. So that's the second phase. The third phase is around generative AI. So we used to get from our buyers or finance team lots of queries into the GBS, like normal GBS would do. Can you compare the forecast from last year to this? Can you look at this? Can you look at the seasonality? Now we have built what we call a TBS GPT. This is all built in house because what we don't want to do is use third party. We want to build this brain inside our organization. And our buyers and our finance people in the UK or even our CEO can type in and ask any question, and even in a graphical format or anyway, it will do that for us. And the accuracy level has gone up to almost 95, 96%. So that has taken away a lot of mundane query answering activity through the GPT. So we have piloted this in Ireland, and Ireland has been very successful. The plan is to now roll it out across the rest of the business. So yeah, AI, the way I look at it is we need to be leveraging this as a co-pilot of the business, number one. And number two, you must have the invest some of that money back, the savings that you generate or efficiency that you drive, into putting the right control and governance, because you will have that hallucination if you're not careful. So you need to make sure how do you have the right controls and governance to put in place to say the output that's coming out is accurate.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I think we had a very similar experience, Sumit, because if you look at the analyst business, uh, a large part of the analyst time is taken up by sort of answering queries, from our customers, inquiries. And what do analysts do there? You look at your own research and try and answer that. Obviously, you add a little bit of perspective to it. What we've done now is put all our research for at least the last 3 years into something like the TBS GPT. We call it the HFS GPT, um, which which can then answer a lot of your questions, that our clients have. And instead of scheduling time with a Saurabh or whoever, which takes a week to get answered, you can basically get it right there. Now you might not get a perfect answer, but you get an 80% answer, right? And that's good enough for a lot of inquiries, which frees up our analysts to do a lot more interesting work. So I think I wanted to touch upon two themes. I'll touch upon the first one. You mentioned something very interesting is, we want to have it as TBS GPT versus a third party. Um, and if you look at the broader services construct now, I think if over the last 12 to 18 months, if you look at the third party services revenues, they've been flat, to put it diplomatically. But if you look at the setups of GBS expansions, or even you look at what's happening with GCCs in India, they've grown through a rapid explosion. It's kind of fantastic to see that growth. What do you think is driving this sort of behavior where third parties are becoming somewhat stagnant? Obviously, they're very large denominator, and so I'm not saying that model is going away, but we're seeing this rapid explosion in sort of in-house, more controlled sort of capability centers, etc. What's your perspective on that?
Look, I think both in-house centers and third party can coexist in this ecosystem, right? I'll start with that. I think absolutely there is a play for both. But what has happened? I mean, in my previous life with BT, I used to work with a lot of third party. In fact, it was almost 60 outsourced, 40 in house, which I changed over a period of time. The reason, what I found, the biggest issue is the they haven't really moved from their FTE revenue model. I think the world has moved on, and I think the third parties, the suppliers, the partners need to start thinking about how they create value. How do, it becomes it's become a value play rather than an FTE play. And we start with FTE, we talk about outcome based pricing, etc. But we never evolve to that. That's a great sales pitch that happens in the beginning, but it never evolves into that. It always remains that FTE, your volume has increased, I need more heads. So it becomes a head count play. Number one. Number two, attrition is pretty high. I mean, if you look at the true attrition, i.e., heads coming in, heads going out, true attrition, it's very high, and you can't really retain the knowledge. And the third issue is you are a bit too far away removed from your end customer, which means that you're a customer of a customer. So that becomes a difficult point. Today, I think organizations are waking up to the fact is your customer is everything. You cannot run your GBS as a standalone thing that you tell it what to do and it'll deliver. It's a subservient operation. It's no longer that. You're a business partner. You you are part of the business. You're core of the business. I always say it's the uh, I remember in 2019 saying GBS is the edge that transforms the core of the business. Today I stand here and say GBS is the core of the business. So being the core of the business, you need to have both content and context of the business. So you can have a lot of content which third parties have, a lot of good chartered accountants, a lot of good commercial guys, procurement guys, great. But what they lack is the business context. Why question. So therefore, which the in-house centers are able to deliver. But I think there is always a room to leverage our partners to drive transformation faster because they have the scale, the ability to ramp up very quickly. So I think there is a partnership ecosystem, but I'm a big supporter of in-house center because you're closer, you understand the business context.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think also the fact that both models will coexist, because if you look at, I agree that it's not a or model. It's not this versus that. It's sort of and model. It should be an and construct, and we should leverage, what works best. I also wanted to talk a little bit about talent, right? That's, ultimately it's about people. This whole model is about people. And, whether you look at the the broad services, IT services, business services construct, whether it's in-house or, and you talked about attrition a lot. Um, how do we make this industry sexy again for the cream of our talent?
I think I'll be a bit controversial here. Sort of. I think it is a very sexy place to work, GBS, and we need to stop being subservient. We need to stop be bold and be brave in terms of how we do things and how we interact and how we position the brand. I hate the term back office. People talk about back office. You put somebody off straight away the moment you say back office. You know, for the stuff that we do in Tesco Business Solutions, is back office the right word? Is GCC global capability? It's not a capability center. It is Tesco. You're working for Tesco. So I think that's what really annoys me. And also I think what has traditionally happened in this space is we have a lot of old school thinkers who can't really think beyond labor arbitrage. They can't get out of that mindset of labor arbitrage, attrition, headcount, and how many heads do I have? It's not about headcount, it's about skill count. And we talk about talent war. Forget about the war. Talent has already won the war. There's no war. So for me, it's about how do you have the right culture, the right processes, right brand. I I have sort of 5,000 people with single digit attrition, and 80% of our attrition is managed attrition. People don't leave us because we have a brand which says your world's best. People don't want to leave a world's best organization and go. So therefore, your brand comes with a halo around you, and people want to associate with a brand which is winning. And Tesco is winning as a business, and therefore GBS, the enabler, is also winning as a business. So therefore, connecting to that mothership, connecting to the culture, and making employee feel that you are part of Tesco, not some back office, dark remote in Timbuktu. You are Tesco. I think that brand is really important to sell it. I have over 3,500 people who are in the queue to join my organization. I don't have to worry about hiring people because our brand is out there. People know us, who we are. I think and I don't think leaders of the business spend enough time to build the brand, be visible on LinkedIn, be visible in the social media. Social media is a thing, it's a big thing for the next generation. And then make sure that the line management capability is right, because people work for the line managers, right? And if you have, because now we are seeing a big amalgamation of different generations, generation X, Y, Z, millennial, and you will see a lot of Gen Zs coming in soon in your workforce. So therefore, if your mind of a manager is still really old school, it's not going to work. So how do you get your managers ready to deal with the change that's coming? And therefore, the GBS brand is tarnished by changing name. GCC, GCA, GIC. I hear all this name. It doesn't change anything. What it does change is what are you doing, the quality of work that you're doing. What is your culture? What is your purpose? What are your values? Do you live your values? That has become more important than anything else.
I That is fantastic. I I couldn't agree more. I think it's it is about the brand. It is about the narrative that you create, and I think that's why you've been successful around this, because you've created both internally and externally, right? And that's what's driving your success. So Sumit, before I let you go, let me ask you this. If let's say you had a magic wand and you had one wish that could come true, what would that be?
Oh God. I think there is a brilliant opportunity to look at how we can perhaps accelerate the deployment of AI in terms of finding more use cases, looking at more end to end, looking at process reengineering. Because I think the future is there, but it's not too far away in terms of what AI can do for us. So, therefore, we need to be change ready. We need to look at our process architecture, need to understand how we can do things differently, because the next generation don't want to do spreadsheets. So therefore, when your new workforce comes and lands here, are you ready for that? Otherwise, it will be a revolving door. So I think we have to be ready, and you can't be sending to the top universities and training them and giving them something from the 1970s to work in. It's not going to happen. There will be a complete mismatch. So therefore, we need to adopt to the technology and culture. And my magic wand is how quickly I can change my organization to be future ready.
This has been a fantastic conversation. I learned so much, so much. So thanks for taking out the time. I think you're absolutely right. This industry is very, very relevant. In fact, more relevant than any time it has been, because it's the core of the business. It's no longer just sort of the edges or the peripheral of the business. What we need is bold leadership. We need a strong narrative, both for creating the demand and for attracting the supply. And I think there's lots of lessons to be learned from this conversation. So thank you again, Sumit, for taking out the time. It was fantastic. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Saurabh. It's a pleasure talking to you, and wish you all the best.